Hello, Year 6. Today we're going to begin to develop our reading skills, looking more at private peaceful, and think today about this skill of inference and how we can draw inferences from elements of the text. As we do this, we'll also look at some of the vocabulary that's used, and you're going to have a couple of little tasks to do relating to the vocabulary before you have your reading questions that are shown at the end of the video. So to repeat, we're going to begin by looking at an element of the text to focus on the vocabulary. And it's the element of the text we didn't read collectively on Monday. And then we're going to have some questions at the end where you're going to understand how to answer them. Okay, so to be a good inferential reader, we need to be able to detect those unspoken meanings. We need to link the text to enable us to draw our own conclusions. We also need to actually be a bit thorough, and we need to copy elements of the text as we read through to support our evidence and so that we can show the understanding that we've drawn. Okay, to begin with, we're going to look at page 15. So if you look at your copies of chapter 1 from that were sent home yesterday, this is still going to be the same chapter we're going to focus on today. And if we look at chapter 15, I'll read through the page starting in the church, and after we've done that, we'll think about a particular element of the text. So in the church, we're sitting side by side in the front row. Mother, Big Joe, Charlie, and me. We've never in our lives sat in the front row before. As a reader, that to me says something important's happened. Something has necessitated the family to sit at the front of the church for the first time. It's where the colonel and his family always sit. The coffin rests on trestles. My father inside in his Sunday suit. Now, most of you will know that a coffin is an encasement where people who are no longer alive are placed. We know what the word coffin means. The sentence here, the key word that some of us won't have had the rich vocabulary to understand beforehand will be trestles. And what you as a reader need to try and unpick is how you'd understand what trestles is based on the sentence in which trestles appears. So I'll repeat that sentence. The coffin rests on trestles. My father inside in his Sunday suit. Now, if anybody's unfortunately had to go to a funeral in the past, they'll know that sometimes coffins are placed at the front of the ceremony. Sometimes they're lifted up on something, and that might underpin your understanding of trestles. The coffin rests on trestles. A swallow, my father inside in his Sunday suit. A swallow swoops over our heads all through the prayers, all through the hymns, flitting from window to window, from the belfry to the altar, looking for some way out. And I know for certain it is father trying to escape. Again, as a reader, I found that really evocative, really powerful, the idea that the child who'd been to see their father's funeral was seeing things happening which were making them think that their father was trying to escape from the coffin. I imagine how much fear must have been going through that child. I know for certain it is father trying to escape. I know it is because he told us more than once that in his next life he'd like to be a bird, so he could flee free wherever he wanted. Again, this as I'm reading through this shows me the extent to which this character was really engaged with their father. Their relationship was a very strong, close one. Big Joe keeps pointing up at the swallow. This is really important to the story, to the whole capacity of us as readers. The fact that Big Joe is another member of the family, but throughout this funeral is not being focused on the father who's dead at the front, but focused on the birds which are around, shows me that Big Joe is different. Big Joe doesn't necessarily know how to behave. Big Joe keeps pointing up at the swallow. Then, without any warning, he gets up and walks to the back of the church where he opens the door. Completely inappropriate behaviour for a funeral. Again, a piece of evidence that Michael Morpurgo, the author, is giving us about how Big Joe is different to people who would follow conventional behaviours. When he gets back, he explains to Mother what he's done in his loud voice. And Grandma Wolf, sitting beside us in her black bonnet, scowls at him, that really powerful facial expression of a scowl, scowls at him, at all of us. I know then what I never understood before, that she is ashamed to be one of us. I didn't really understand why until later, until I was older. There's two or three things to unpick in that sentence. This idea that there's another character who doesn't respond kindly to Big Joe and to the family. And also the way the narrator, the way that this character is setting up, that later on we'll understand more about how adults treat other adults. And that tells me something about how different the relationships between children and adults can be. Back to the vocabulary in this sentence then. The coffin rests on trestles. My father inside in his Sunday suit. If you've got that foreknowledge, if you've got that previous knowledge of what a coffin is, you'll know, as I said, that sometimes they're raised at the front of a service, whether it be in a church or in another place where people might go to remember somebody who has passed away. If I know it's something that's being raised, I know that it's something that's pushing something up. Now, trestles in this instance are a noun. Trestles, it's a two-syllable word. Now, the definition of them is they're a framework consisting of a horizontal beam supported by two pairs of sloping legs. So basically, it's something that pushes something up, trestles. Now, even if I didn't know that through looking in a dictionary or through having seen the word trestles before, the fact that something as large as this large oblong could be supported, this large box could be supported, raised up on them, tells me that they would be a structure that would have that capacity. Now, as I work through, I can think that other things could support something like a post, like a prop. But I also know that they're not part of it. They're not an extension of it, like a branch or an annex. So I can see that my synonyms might be a post, might be a prop, but my antonyms, the opposites, might be words such as branch or annex. What we're going to do now is we're going to read two other pages. And at the end of those two pages, we're going to have some questions relating to the whole chapter. But prior to that, I'd like you to try and do a similar task about the vocabulary that comes up on those two pages. So if we move now to page 16, the swallow sits perched on a rafter high above the coffin. It lifts off and swoops up and down the aisle until at last it finds the open door and is gone. And I know that father is happy now in his next life. Big Joe laughs out loud and mother takes his hand in hers. Charlie catches my eye. At that moment, all four of us are thinking the very same thing. I found that a really powerful phrase as well. This idea that they're all thinking the same thing shows there's a real synergy, a real unison in the family. The colonel gets up into the pulpit to speak, his hand clutching the lapel of his jacket, showing how grand he is, the colonel. He declares that James Peaceful was a good man, one of the best workers he's ever known. This is interesting, isn't it? Because to describe somebody as a good man because they work hard is a very specific way of claiming that they're good. That seems to think that you treat them as somebody who should do a job for you. It shows me that the relationship is not an equal one. One of the best workers he has ever known, the salt of the earth, always cheerful as he went about his work, that the Peaceful family had been employed in one capacity or another by his family for 5 generations. And this links almost to this idea of servitude. So if we think about some of our work in PSHE from previous terms, where we've looked at the idea that people's families were controlled by other families, almost like slavery. This family had worked for them for many years. There hadn't been a relationship of equals. In all his 30 years as a forester on the estate, James Peaceful had never once been late for work and was a credit to his family and his village. Again, it's all about work. It's not about him as a family man. It's not about how he cared for people. This relationship wasn't an equal one. All the while, as the colonel drones on, I'm thinking of the rude things father used to say about him. Silly old fart, mad old duffer, and much worse. And how mother had always told us that he might well be a silly old fart or a mad old duffer, but how it was the colonel who paid father's wages and owned the roof over our heads. How, again, that relationship's not equal. How we children should show respect for him and touch our forelocks, and we should look as if we meant it too, if we knew what was good for us. Afterwards, we all gather around the grave and father's lowered down and the vicar won't stop talking. Now, at the end of this page, before you proceed, I'd like you just to have a look at that sentence that started with the colonel gets up into the pulpit to speak. And think if you can try and unpick, like we did with the previous slide, the word trestles, but if you try and unpick the word pulpit, how many syllables does it have? You can see 2 there. What does pulpit mean? If you didn't have a dictionary, how would you know what pulpit meant based on where the characters were, what he was doing? How is it used? Could you use it in a sentence yourself? Pause the video while you think about that. And now we'll move on to I want, and then on to page 17. I want Father to hear the birds for the last time before the earth closes in on top of him, and he has nothing left but silence. Father loves larks, loves watching them rising so high you can only see their song. I look up hoping for a lark, and there is a blackbird singing from the yew tree. A blackbird will have to do. I hear Mother whispering to Big Joe that Father is not really in his coffin anymore, but in heaven up there. She's pointing up into the sky beyond the church tower, and that is happy, happy as the birds. The earth thuds and thumps down on the coffin behind us as we drift away, leaving him. We walk home together along the deep lanes, but Big Joe plucking at the foxgloves and the honeysuckle, filling Mother's hands with flowers, and none of us has any tears or words to say. Me least of all, for I have inside me a secret so horrible, a secret I can never tell anyone, not even Charlie. And this is really important in understanding that relationship between Tommy, our narrator, and Charlie. The fact that the author says not even Charlie shows that normally, even if he couldn't tell Mum, even if he couldn't tell Big Joe, Tommy could tell Charlie. But here he couldn't tell Charlie. Father needn't have died that morning in Ford's Cleve Wood. He was trying to save me. If only I had tried to save myself. If I had run, he would not be lying dead in his coffin. This guilt is really coming through now. As Mother smooths my hair and Big Joe offers her another foxglove, all I can think is that I have caused this. I have killed my own father. And as we look here, rather than a noun, as with the two previous pieces of vocabulary, we've got plucking, the verb plucking, and seeing if we can understand how plucking could be defined based on Big Joe doing something where he's getting honeysuckle and foxgloves and giving them to his mother. Okay, see if you can have a go at pulling through that piece of vocabulary. And then what we're going to think about is we're going back to page 10 and 11. We're thinking about finding a copy, and this is our inferential skills, find a copy or phrase which shows the narrator is worried about going to school. Now, if I look through this text again, pages 10 and 11, which you read yesterday, I can see within it that there's a section before Charlie and Tommy arrive at school, where Charlie is finding the hill up into the village hard going. I can see the church tower and below it the roof of the school. My mouth is dry with fear. I cling on tighter. Now, these phrases are here, my mouth is dry with fear and I cling on tighter, show that Tommy's not happy to be going where he's been sent. My mouth is dry with fear. I cling on tighter. Now, I could just, if I want 1 mark rather than 2, say my mouth is dry with fear. I cling on tighter. However, to really demonstrate my understanding, I'd say the fact that Tommy's clinging on with fear shows how desperate he is not to leave his brother. The dry state of his mouth demonstrates that he is nervous. It's a common form of nervousness to be dry-mouthed. It's a common thing that happens when people are nervous. Now, that's an example of the quality of answer I'd like you to produce for these following questions. Now, we've done the first one together. I'd like you to work through the other 4 and see if you can complete them based on that first chapter. We'll begin reading chapter 2 in tomorrow's reading session on Wednesday. Right, year 6, sorry. I hope you're enjoying Private Peaceful. It's a shame we can't read it all together. However, I think you will really enjoy it as a text. See you soon.